Among the multitude of questions that I receive from you every day, every week, obviously at the moment in the current climate, the most common question is what will happen to house prices? Should I sell now? Should I wait? Should I remortgage now? Should I wait? Etc. Obviously, everything that I say in terms of what may happen to property prices over the next few months or year or two, indeed from anyone, is purely conjecture based on figures, recent figures, and past history. So any one of us could be right, and equally, any one of us could be wrong. So rather than just throw around figures of properties going to fall by X amount or not fall at all, or whatever the case may be, I thought on this occasion I would actually point out the factors that do affect property prices and allow you to base your opinion on these important factors. Now, there are several market forces that affect house prices. It could be argued that people simply selling and buying in equal number have no effect on house prices. That's actually a yes and a no, because when there are lots of people moving, even if the ratio is equal, so it's not a seller's market, it's not a buyer's market, invariably there are certain pockets that will be in more demand than others. And where there is more activity as a whole, the areas that are in demand will obviously achieve more interest and therefore will achieve higher prices, and that then filters out. Because if a property that has been selling for 500,000 for the last 12 months, suddenly for whatever reason there's interest and it then sells for 20, 30, 50,000 above market value, then the neighboring area will compare itself to that and increase its asking prices, and that will filter outwards. As you normally know, in most cases, but not all, property price increases begin in London, where the activity is often the highest, and filter outwards. So it's a yes and a no there, depending on the circumstances. Obviously, the number of sellers, the ratio of sellers to buyers does affect property prices. For the last 18 months to 2 years, we have been in what's called a seller's market, because there are many more buyers than there are available properties, which has an upward pressure on prices. This has now reversed. I won't say it's collapsed, but there is a significant fall in the number of buyers, but there has also been a significant increase in the number of sellers. I have heard exaggerated figures by as much as 4 new sellers to every buyer on the market. I think that's a bit on the high side. I don't think it's as much as that, but there are definitely more sellers coming onto the market than there are buyers looking, or new buyers coming to the market. Affordability. We all know that affordability with property is at its lowest ever, with the average house now being somewhere around 7 times the average salary. But we also need to take into account that that was nearly the case just a few months ago, and property was selling. But we need to take into consideration the inflation factor and how that affects affordability. Let's just say that by the end of this year, property is not worth a penny less or a penny more than it was on the 1st of January last year. That means in 2 years, property hasn't increased, but it hasn't fallen either. If we factor in inflation, that was almost 11% last year, and that's not real inflation, that's based on the government figures. True inflation, as we all know, is significantly higher than that, many products that we buy now, even in the supermarkets. I'm not great at remembering prices, but many things I see now that were £1 are now 125, 135. That's a significant increase. And at the moment, the projected figure by the end of the year is to come down to 6%. They revised that from a lower figure a few months ago. It may well be the way things are looking at the moment that we don't even get down to that. I would say we'll probably be higher than that, probably more like 7 or 8, but who knows? If we take almost 11% this year and 6 or 7%, if not more, this year, compounded on top of that, we're talking about an increase of over 18% by the end of this year. And therefore, if prices are the same at the end of this year as they were on the 1st of January last year, in real terms, they have fallen 18%. That's before asking or selling prices have dropped even a single penny. That will invariably affect affordability in a positive way. So that needs to be taken into consideration. Not to mention the fact that prices have fallen somewhat, but the figures are so vague for many of the following reasons, which I'll go into in a minute. Overseas buyers. Although there will always be an element of the super rich who will buy the very top end properties, no matter what the price, what the climate, they have been dwindling since 2016. Why have they been dwindling? We're back to George Osborne again with his 3% stamp duty surcharge on properties that are not your primary residence, followed by an additional 2% surcharge for investors buying a property in the UK who do not reside here. That has had adverse effects, and as a result, for the main part, property in the upper quartile in London is worth no more today than it was in 2016. So you need to consider, how does that affect prices as a whole? A very common misconception or misrepresentation of the facts is that there is so much less house building now. In the 70s, there was so much more house building, and that's why there's a shortage of property. The reality is that that is not the case. You may be surprised if I were to tell you that although there were more houses built in the 70s, there were also many more houses being knocked down. And it may also surprise you to know that over the last 2 or 3 years, there have been more properties in total net increase than at any time in the 70s. However, that fact is not really mentioned because the industry wants, as a whole, wants to create this sense of a dwindling supply, when in fact that's not really the case. Not everywhere. Certainly in certain areas of demand, that is, always has been, probably always will be the case. The next factor that can affect prices, is affecting them now, and could potentially affect them in the future depending what happens, is immigration. Again, it's a vague figure because we hear all sorts of different figures. Total immigration, net immigration, etc., etc. The fact remains that over the last decade or two, millions of people came to this country, increasing demand on property. And although there are opinions on both sides of the fence, I would say the following. If you were to look around your local community, your local warehouses, shops, whatever the case may be, and try to guesstimate the elimination of every person who's come to this country in the last 20 years, how would our country function? And that takes us to the next step, is why doesn't the government just actually speak honestly to the people and say that we are in desperate need of people to come to this country because of our changing demographics? then perhaps we could, as a whole, as a nation, view this differently. And more importantly than that, is that immigration would not be used as a decoy by the government to set us against each other, and they could use they would no longer be able to use this argument to distract from the mess that they're making. But that fact would actually involve the government admitting that they are really the people traffickers in disguise, because they are encouraging the immigration because we need it, but pretending to be the virtuous hand of justice on the other side. So that's an interesting thought. But going back to what I was saying, immigration has declined from where it has been in the last few years. And even though there will be an increasing demand for younger people, it depends on how policies go, on how much immigration there will be, and therefore how much demand on housing. That remains to be seen. The next factor, which once again you may or may not be aware of, is from 2025 onwards, this country will be entering a period of population decline not seen for generations. As the older generations, the baby boomers, take their turn to start to leave us, and then Generation X, including myself, then begin to take their turn, there will be a colossal impact on the demographics of our population, the number of older people who are passing on, the reducing and declining number of younger people. And once again, without younger people to replace the population, then we will have a serious problem. If you are into property around the world, you may be aware that, with the exception of certain areas of high demand, such as Tokyo, property prices in Japan are no higher now than they were 20 or 30 years ago, because of declining demand with a declining population. So that's also a factor that you need to take account of. Thirdly, property prices. Now, with regards to property prices, I refer back to my favourite quote: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Tony Benn, colourful politician, didn't agree with most of what he said, but I thought he was brilliant. Anyway, now, what you need to bear in mind is asking prices 1 year ago, on average, equated to agreed prices 6 months ago, on average, which equate to completed sales now or in the last month or so, on average, which equate to publicised figures on the land registry in 3 or 4 months from now. That's a long period for the public to not really be able to get any accurate figures on sold prices, because they are kept as a closely guarded secret. Now, the industry as a whole uses whatever figures suit its agenda. In a rising market, they will willingly tell you properties have sold for 5, 10, 20, 50,000 over asking price. When the market is more subdued or falling, they change. And there is a big difference between asking prices, agreed prices, average prices, and median prices. When you're in a market where we are now, where they perhaps want to camouflage the true figures, more often than not, they will use the average price. You may be aware that only last month, Rightmove announced the average asking price is slightly higher than the month before, and everybody should rush out and mortgage themselves to the hilt and buy. But why was this? Property is still selling now. It always sells. in perhaps lower numbers, but it does sell. However, it is property that is priced correctly that sells. Property that's been on the market for a while with belligerent sellers who refuse to come down won't find buyers. And yet property that went on the market in November or December at the right price, at a realistic price, have found buyers. But invariably in this climate, it is the cheapest property that sells. So take a given area, postcode sector, for example. If there are 100 properties for sale and the cheapest 10 properties sell first and half a dozen higher end properties come onto the market, which is actually what's happening, there are more higher priced properties coming to market than lower priced properties, then the average asking price has gone up. In fact, without any change, if there are, to make it simple, 10 properties in a postcode sector ranging from 100,000 to 2 million, if the property of the lowest two properties of say 100 and 150,000 were to sell, the average price by virtue of the average has gone up immediately. But that's not telling the full story. If you were to look at the median figure, the average price would have actually stayed the same or gone down, which it actually has done. So you need to take this into account, that many of these professionals with a loyalty to the industry, I'd say, massage the figures and present you with whichever methodology will suit their own personal agenda. I'd like to draw your attention to two professional people, presenters, who are very, very good at presenting you with information about the state of the property market. Unfortunately, I can't dazzle you with charts, graphs and animations. I just don't have the time. I don't even have time to write a script for what I'm going to tell you. I literally, in between work, have to just turn the camera on and basically wing it, as you can probably gather. If you would like more detailed information about everything that's happening to the market to draw your own conclusions, I'd like to refer you to look at a chap called Charlie Lambden, who is very, very good with his figures, and he has a slightly more pessimistic view of the market than I do. And the other one, Christopher Watkins, who is a respected industry professional, and Christopher has a slightly more optimistic view of the market than I do. Any one of us could be right, any one of us could be wrong, but if you are a glutton for punishment and you would like more information and you want to see actual charts and actual graphs and links to where you can find them, which I, for the main part, don't have time to present you with, then I'd strongly urge you to seek these gentlemen out and listen to what they have to say as well. I hope that this has been of some help to you. I know it doesn't answer your questions, but where this is concerned, I don't think I can answer it. I can only present you with the way that the way that I see the market is going. But who knows where we'll be tomorrow, let alone in a few months' time. That's all for today. As always, please feel free to contact me with any questions that you may have, and I'll see you in the next video.